Hey Ted,
Hey.
how are you?
I was literally for a second, I was like, is he on a fucking yacht?
Yeah, I grabbed this in a split second decision one time, and I've just decided to keep it because I get reactions like that.
Yeah. For a half a second, I was like, what is like all these thoughts went through my head, like, what is my life that I'm not like, you know,
uh,
punk news guy is on a yacht.
right, that's where the money is, punk rock. How are you doing?
Doing all right. Doing all right.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can have a discussion in 2021 without talking about or giving some kind of caveat like, well, it's a pandemic, but
Yeah.
I'm alive. And
Yeah, exactly.
so, what have you been up to the last 12 months or so?
Well, um, I canceled 3 tours. Um, one of which was more or less meant to be my like entire income for the year. But I did a series of um, streaming shows from a theater in Providence back in October, November, which was good. It was actually really fun, and I'm glad that I was able to eventually get my head around doing something like that. But other than that, I've just been holding it down. Like, spent the first half of the year kind of trying to finish up a bunch of shipping that I had to do for my Kickstarter thing from a couple of years ago, and dealing with some trying to stay ahead of some health stuff that I given that there's not really much to do other than sit around and figure out ways to be more fit. I did some of the I did a lot of that. Yeah.
Hmm. How do you find the I don't want to call it remote concerts, the Zoom concerts? It's obviously a different experience, but
Yeah, well, I haven't done any like the thing that I did was we set up in a theater and really, did a lot of production work to make it uh, a different kind of thing. Like I
okay,
had
you had a
it
budget.
was no, I didn't have any budget at all.
Okay.
Everybody was, but we made it look like we had a budget, and I was able to pay the people who worked on it with me once the shows were done, but we didn't have any budget for doing it, but we were able to put a lot of work in, and sort of try to approach it like an old school variety show where there were I was playing with a lot of graphics behind me, and I did a mix of playing solo or playing with backing tracks that I'd recorded, and we had guests that we did remote stuff with, where like they would send me uh, some tracks, and then I would like finish the music track so that it was a collaborative thing, and then we did either videos of it separately, and a friend of mine who was kind of the director of the thing would edit it into a piece, or else we figured out how to either do me with them in front of a green screen or have them projected. So I was actually in the show playing live with what was a recorded, newly recorded version of them, and etc. Yeah, it was more than me sitting here right now at my desk talking to
Uh,
you.
yeah, it's been interesting to see the resourcefulness that people have come up with in the pandemic. Don't want to call it necessarily a silver lining because, well, maybe it is a silver
Yeah,
lining.
I mean that's an interesting thing. Like, you always have to make the best of a situation, and sometimes you definitely come up with things that um, are really interesting and fun to do. Like, I'm kind of, when everybody just immediately started jumping in on like, hey, everybody, I'm doing 1,000 shows at my desk. The first week that lockdowns were announced, I was like, it's not for me. Like, I'm just gonna wait, and I don't like the world has got enough going on, and I also felt like all the air for that was just sucked out of the room to a certain degree, you know. So I was like, I'm just gonna whatever. Like I've got a lot of other work to do, and you know, that's how it's gonna be. And taking the time to figure out how I would be able to present something that I really wanted to under the circumstances was good for me. And also, by the way, just as a caveat, I'm not trying to suggest that all those shows weren't amazing, because I'm certainly now, I mean, it's a year later, but I'm now at a point where I think I would feel a lot more comfortable doing that, and I recognize the value of all of that and the intimacy that everybody was offering, and I think it was great. It just, for me, in the brain that I had and have, it wasn't right at that moment. But yeah, long-winded way of saying that. Yeah, you hesitate to call it a silver lining, you know, when it's like bad stuff that you know, forces you into a box. But when you can still figure out ways to be creative within that box, sometimes you can find things that are unexpectedly exciting and fulfilling. And I enjoyed doing that enough that I think I will probably do more like that, whether we go back to venues or not. You know, it was that it was great for me.
Nice. So tell me what you can about the upcoming Lookout Zoomout.
Well, you mean in terms of like, well, I'll tell you what I can tell you about it.
That's all.
It's a show that a bunch of people who were on Lookout bands are playing, hosted by Grant from the Smugglers. And he's been doing a series of these. This is the last one. And, you know, there's like a little bit of chat and a lot of song playing. And, yeah, you know, for me, being able to do this particular show with Dr. Frank from Mr. T Experience and obviously, especially Penelope Houston from Penelope Houston and the Avengers, as well as people from Common Rider and Brent's TV and like some real classic, you know, Lookout bands. It's nice. It's like it's actually closer to the core of like, you know, playing with those people than I was when I was actually on the label.
Yeah, that's actually kind of what I was wondering about, is because when you joined Lookout, it was what, about 2001 with Tyranny of Distance?
It would have, well, I mean, I guess Tyranny of Distance came out in the spring of 2001, but yeah, I would have made the decision to sign up with them in 2000 at some point.
Okay. So at that point, the identity of Lookout was kind of established as like an East Bay, you know, Op IV and Isocracy, Crimpshrine, as well as some of the Ramones influenced bands that they had, Screeching Weasel and Queers and Groovy Ghoulies. And I'm curious, was that an easy decision for you to join Lookout, not exactly fitting with that mold at that time, and Lookout was kind of starting to branch out, but not fully?
It was an easy decision for me. The only hard aspect of it was making the decision to leave Gurn Blanston, you know, because I had been friends with Charles from Rorschach and Gurn Blanston, you know, since we were kids, basically. And I had, for years, I mean, from Chisel through the first solo record that I did, pretty much only done records with him, you know. And it was just sort of a, you know, it was a great situation and kind of an unspoken, I guess, you know, deal in quotes between us that, like, if I wanted to put out a record, he would put it out. And the idea, it's so hilarious to think about these things in retrospect, because especially since, these days I don't even know if people think twice about, signing to a major label or selling their songs to commercials, or it seems like the goal for, but at the time, even just moving from Gurn to Lookout was like a couple rungs up the ladder that like set off a lot of, DIY, like punk world alarm bells for me, like in my own brain. And it took some talking and some thinking, and but that said, I mean, I had been a fan of a lot of Lookout stuff since its inception, especially the bands like Crimpshrine. Crimpshrine in particular, I think was a pretty contemporary but big influence on like early Chisel. The kind of like really classically melodic punk music that that wasn't like retro or garage band, style. Not garage band the program, garage band the genre style, and so in one sense that was really cool for me. Op Ivy was another band that was really, really, huge for me. Chisel actually covered a couple of Op Ivy songs really early on. Like we were very much fans of that stuff. But then in terms of like where I would fit in, I mean, I think that the first record that I made for Lookout is the most anomalous in that. Like, Tyranny of Distance probably fits the least in that equation of the 4 records that I did with them. But that said, you have to think about it in and this is how I thought about it in terms of myself and everybody who was currently running the label, Chris Applegren and Molly Newman and everybody. We were all of the same age, and I wasn't interested in continuing to make the same kind of music year after year. I was just always interested in evolving. I mean, Chisel itself from 1990 to 1997 evolved quite a bit, from covering Crimpshrine and Op Ivy songs to being much more kind of orchestrated, like 60s influenced, music. But the thing is, everybody who was running the label, like anybody who listens to music, like it's rare. I mean, I shouldn't say anybody, but it's rare that people only listen to one thing. We all go through our big phases or deep dives, or if we only want to hear one thing for a while, like we do that. But nobody, again, I probably shouldn't say nobody, but like most people listen to and appreciate a lot of different kinds of music. And having all grown up in the hardcore scene of the 80s, like no matter where you go from there, there's a grounding. I mean, I know this sounds trite, but again, maybe this isn't true anymore, but I have always found that you can when somebody grew up punk and when somebody didn't. And it's not, again, this is not a value judgment on this person or their life. It's just that you have a shared vocabulary and a shared set of experiences that that transcend, a lot of need to discuss certain things, transcend even, what you may be doing in the current moment. You meet somebody who's doing something wildly different, and you find out that they were, in hardcore bands in the 80s, and it clicks. You're like, oh yeah, I get it. And I think that's what we shared. I was, I also understand that a lot of people, and certainly a lot of people who are Lookout Records fans, would argue with me about this, but I don't think there's a thing that I did during my time period on that label that, I wouldn't classify as punk. I mean, I feel like if the Clash get away with calling half of their catalog punk,
And
then so do I, yeah. So, and it, it's about the attitude, man, but it is at a certain point. And like, while I realized that, like, especially Tyranny Distance was something that was a bit of a departure musically for what was going on the label, it was understandable to everybody who was running the label, just like it was understandable to me coming out of me. A lot of the references were older stuff that we grew up with or that we listened to before we got into hardcore, and they understood my progression to the point of making that record, and they appreciated that record for what it was. So it didn't feel weird to me at all, because it's not like I brought them a record that they were like, whoa, like, we're not feeling the Winona Ryder's influence in this, or like, they were like, yeah, we get it and we like it, and that's it.
What was it like when you started to see some red flags? Could maybe see the writing on the wall with Lookout. Bands started pulling their catalogs. From an artist perspective, you left Lookout, you went to Touch and Go. Touch and Go ultimately folded. Was that as frustrating as it sounds like it would be?
It was. I mean, you say I left Lookout. I didn't leave Lookout. Lookout fell apart underneath me. Those people were my friends, and I enjoyed working with them, and I wanted the label to succeed. I mean, I will say this. I don't know, and I never really, pried into a ton of the specifics about what went on with, bigger bands pulling their catalogs and whatnot. I kind of know as much as anybody does, but from the inside, I will say, without meaning to suggest that anybody was acting with ill intent, I think that some bad decisions were being made. I think that there was probably some money being thrown around at things that where maybe people were rolling the dice on certain things happening for a lot of like new hipstery kind of bands, and perhaps in hindsight, although I do think a lot of people, including myself, maybe did see it at the time, like, the resources could have gone to continue to support the things that were sort of solidly plugging along. It certainly left me in a financially bad state, because I had royalties that were lingering, and we had to come to an agreement about.
Did you get the rights back to those Lookout releases?
Oh, I did. Yeah. That reverted immediately. That was no problem. But I also got like a semi truck came and it delivered in lieu of some of those royalties. So like 4 or 5 pallets of mostly CDs, which, as I'm sure you know, by the middle of the 2000s were not. Most of them are still sitting right below where I'm talking to you from right now, just waiting for the retro CD fad to come back into.
It'll get there.
Back into vogue, yeah.
I read someone recently say that Shake the Sheets was the last great Lookout release, and I was inclined to agree at first, but then I realized Shark Bite Sessions came out after that, which is great. I mean, the 6 months in a Leaky Boat might be better than the original,
Yeah, I will not cop to that. I'm gonna argue with you on that, but I appreciate the sentiment.
um, you've covered a lot of different artists. You've covered Stiff Little Fingers. You've covered Kelly Clarkson. What is it about a song that draws you to record a cover, to actually, rather than just enjoying a song, to actually record a cover? And what role does royalties to other artists play in that decision?
Well, because it's the shortest part of the answer, getting the royalties part out of the way. I mean, that doesn't factor in at all, honestly. Like, um, I mean, the way that works is like their publishing and collection rights agency, like they'll collect for them. Anyone can do a cover of anybody, and as long as you sort of accredit it correctly, like you don't have to buy the song or buy the rights to the song. Like that'll get the whatever money flows from the owner's side of it will usually accrue to them, and they can track it down. And
I'd read a conjecture someone made that you had wanted to do a Springsteen cover, but weren't able to due to having extra royalties or
no,
no.
that's not true. No, as far as I know, it's not the case that you have to pay up front to do that. As long as the money on the back end flows correctly to the owners of the rights to it. I mean, I have covered. I mean, I guess I haven't released any Springsteen songs, but
that was that was like the reason why they were making that supposition.
No, the reason would be that probably just that would be too obvious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in answer to the first part of your question, I appreciate your framing of, as opposed to just like being a fan of it, like what makes you want to cover it. And honestly, the answer is just because I'm enough of a fan of it. Usually, like like I am a fan of music, and I like singing and playing music, and it's fun to sing other songs that you like. I certainly don't walk around the house singing my own songs. I don't think unless I'm like actively working on them in my head or thinking about them for some reason, practicing them mentally. I don't ever sing that's a little weird. Especially most of the last 30 years, the amount of time I've spent actually on stage playing them, it's not often that I just am doing the dishes and wind up whistling heart problems or something. But I love I love music, and I love other people's songs, and it's fun to sing and play them, and it's fun to do a take on them, and sometimes that take is really correct to the original, because like I don't want to mess with it. Sometimes it's fun to take it to a different place. With Suspect Device, for example, I think probably back when we were doing that, probably started doing that around 2002, and then we put it on that Shark Bite sessions in 04 or whenever that came out. And we continued to play it off and on for a couple of years after that. And I think sometimes with me, what I like when I choose a cover like that, that's more like out of the canon, out of the songbook that you would imagine you would find on my songbook shelf, whatever. It's sometimes because I actually am like choosing to make something explicit about influence that is not as much out in the offing. Like I don't really think a lot of people were talking about Stiff Little Fingers during that time period. Like they'd kind of fallen into a little bit of a memory hole. I think the same thing about Thin Lizzy, when like in the late 90s and early 2000s, when that was a really big influence on my songwriting. nobody was talking about Thin Lizzy back then, you know, and it was sometimes we would do a Thin Lizzy song to remind, like literally to remind people about Thin Lizzy, like to make it explicit, like this is influencing us, and oh yeah, why don't we just play one of their songs while we're at it. With the Kelly Clarkson song, that's something like the idea for that is something that I've done a couple of times. It's something I don't really do that much anymore. Which is, you know, doing something with a little bit of irony. But I wouldn't do it if I didn't have genuine appreciation for it. Like the short but true story behind that is just that back when that came out, like I had a session for a website that I was supposed to be doing, and I literally just I woke up in the morning, I saw the video for that on like VH1. I just happened to be like literally like switching past, and I was like, whoa, what's this? And I just thought it was a great pop song. It was a great hook that, you know, I also like immediately understood so much about it, how it was like a jet propulsion lab created amalgam of like current trends in indie rock, you know, and given to this person who you wouldn't have expected to be singing a song like that, Kelly Clarkson, but who did, just like her voice was great for it. And I both like thought it would be funny for me to do, but also like, you know, sometimes with a song like that, if someone that you don't expect to hear sings it, it you know, it can like reveal something else about the song. And basically, like, I was like, yes, I was doing it ironically, yes, I saw the humor in me doing it, but also I was trying to illustrate that I appreciate what a great piece of pop craftsmanship it was, and that I actually enjoyed it and enjoyed singing it, you know.
Yeah, wanted to check in real quick about time. How are you doing? Do you want to
I'm actually fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just give me like a little some type of
Sure. Yeah. maybe like by 10 we should wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you an atheist when you went to Catholic high school and then Notre Dame?
No. Very much not. When I was in high school, kind of made that turn during my time of college, but I you know, I don't think I would have called myself an atheist. I think I became a kind of hard agnostic. uh, I I very much eventually became convinced of the negative effects of religion on society, and largely became convinced of the, you know, the well, that it's all just mythology and that there's not really anything provable behind any of it. You know, I mean, I retain a deep appreciation for especially the kind of Catholicism that I grew up with, though I rubbed up against a lot of the really, you know, horrible aspects of it. There was a that kind of like old school, you know, ethnic immigrant Catholicism from the early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century that pervades and was certainly part of the milieu that I grew up in New Jersey and New York, in the 70s and 80s. And it had strong social justice teaching, and that really stuck with me. And it gave me a sense of community too, that, you know, I absolutely ran away from, and I'm not back to it, but I now like I appreciate the things it gave me.
Mm-hmm. And it brought together Chisel, right?
I certainly did. Yeah. Yeah.
Because Chisel was going for at least a couple years while you were in college,
Yeah.
and then
Mhm.
continued on thereafter. Did you have a like a backup plan if music wasn't going to lead you to where it is now?
Oh, you mean to being thousands and thousands of dollars in debt and
To
and
being like a
wishing that I'd have taken that of the backup plan 30 years ago. Uh,
well, yeah. What
yeah.
was it if you had one?
I didn't have a specific backup plan. No. I was very much just kind of taking things as they happened. I didn't have any long-term goals per se. I mean, I never did with music itself. I mean, it's funny talking about like Lookout and this in the context of Lookout, because by the time I signed with Lookout, like it's again, this is another thing that's really funny to think about now, because it was over, it was 20 and 21 years ago, but I'd only really been playing in bands for 15 years or something at that point in time, but I was already like done. Like I started playing solo not because I wanted to be like a solo artist. I mean, that's why I did that dumb stuff of like obscuring my name in the beginning and everything, because I explicitly did not want to be like singer-songwriter Ted Leo, but I didn't have a band. And I didn't want to be in another band for a while. I was sick of like band dynamics. I was sick of the game. I was sick of like, Chisel had been courted by like lawyers and major labels, and another thing, like, yeah, maybe maybe I should have said yes to some of that. Hindsight's 2020, but ultimately, I guess I'm glad I didn't. But it all kind of like, by the time the '90s were coming to an end, I had a bad taste in my mouth for like the whole thing, except writing songs and playing music. So when so like when I first started doing records with Lookout, it was already this like weird second wind, like this weird second or third part of my quote unquote career. I totally forget what you asked me.
I was just wondering about kind of like the trajectory of someone who had played music for quite a while,
Oh yeah.
And then graduating from a pretty prestigious college. I think
Right.
many people would feel
Right.
like there were certain
Right.
expectations in one way or another.
Yeah, well, that definitely those expectations definitely came to bear, or early on, especially. Like there were bands that I was in earlier on that, let's just say like I couldn't, I had to fulfill certain expectations, and I did not keep up with. I mean, that was like Citizens Arrest. That was the subsequent band Hell No. Uh, Hell No. I was out of school for a while, and I was back at home and working, and it would have been my first chance to tour Europe, but I was basically, it's like, no, you have to work, you have to stay home and work, you can't be doing this thing, and it took a while. I mean, again, like I'm not trying to throw my parents under the bus or anything. Eventually, they very much came around to appreciate what I do, and have been very supportive. But yeah, for a while, I definitely did feel the weight of those expectations. But once I moved to DC and Chisel was kind of going as a full-time concern, I mean, we were all working day jobs, but I wasn't in like a career trajectory. And I think like every time there was like a fork in the road where I could have career trajectoried, like something good would happen in music, and then I'd go, oh, okay, let's do this for another 2 years, and then like I'd hit another fork. I'd be like, and then like something good would happen. Go, okay, I'll do this for another 2 years, and it just kind of like kept going along like that. There's never really any specific arc to it.
Mm-hmm. What was it like as a longtime DC guy watching the events of January 6th unfold?
That was nuts. I mean, specifically interesting thing about that is that I worked for CBS News for a long time when I lived in DC. That was there was this position there where they had a pool of um, couriers and just kind of like general assistants. That was a kind of a handed down job in the DC punk scene. Like people would cover for each other so that someone could go on tour, and there were always like 3 or 4 of us, like, you know, working at working there at the same time. And one of the things that I did a lot was go just kind of ferry videotapes before smartphones and internet and everything, you know, and just ferry videotapes around from shoots in the area back to headquarters to be edited and stuff. So I was always on Capitol Hill and at the White House and at the Supreme Court. And I was just there. Like the security situation is so wildly different now than it was back then. I would just go and sit in front of the Supreme Court with a walkie-talkie and a book and like wait to get called on my walkie-talkie and go, okay, come in, pick up the tapes. Like I'd go in, I'd flash my. You should see the quality of my CBS ID from back then. I still have it, and it looks so fake. It's like, you know, flash it, go through the metal detector, no big deal. So to see how different things are, it all, you know, it really started in 93 with the World Trade Center, the first World Trade Center bombing, when airports stopped letting you down to the gate if you didn't have a ticket and things like that, and things started tightening up in DC. Then obviously 9/11, 2001, things really changed, and to see like actual fencing around the Capitol, or the fencing that they threw up around Lafayette Park when Trump did his bullshit, you know, photo op in front of the church, is it's disturbing, but not because it's DC, just because it indicates how fucked up things are, and, you know, what a different level of engagement with well, let's talk specifically about January 6th. I mean, what a different level of engagement with like fascism and right-wing lunacy we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, we have to deal with it. I hate to, I'm not actually really, throughout my life, I've kind of gone back and forth between being like, sunlight's the best disinfectant, and like deplatform these fuckers, you know? I'm a little bit more on the deplatform side of things these days. I think that too much air is given to a lot of these things that can send people vulnerable to theories of racism and you know, QAnon ridiculousness, down rabbit holes that they might not have gone down otherwise. I mean, there's also a really long-winded answer, obviously, but like, it doesn't really have much to do with me having lived in DC. Like, personally, it's weird for me to see these fences and to see the level of security and to see fucking right-wing. I mean, look, this is punk news. We can talk about this a little bit. Like, we fought the Nazis out of our scenes in the 80s, you know, like physically fought them out of our scenes in the 80s. Like, it has been wild to see the resurgence. It's been really, really nutty, and you know, the least disheartening thing about it is how it relates back to like my history in the punk scene and DC and everything. The most disheartening thing about it is how it relates to, you know, dead people being brutalized and murdered, and of course, I include the forces, civic and state, that support the institutions of white supremacy, that we actually are much more aware now that we constantly live under. When I say that,
yeah, I think I tend to agree. You talked about like kind of toggling between what was the analogy you used? Shine a light on it.
Sunlight's the best disinfectant.
Yeah. No, I think I've come to that place where it's just clear that misinformation has too many consequences. It's too far-reaching.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour. Can you talk a little bit about what you have planned, if anything, after the Lookout Zoomout?
Yeah, not much. I still am trying to scrape together some money to finish like the last bits of things that I owe people before I can move on and do anything else. But I do have some things planned. I have kind of a backlog of songs that I'm working on remixing, and I don't have a label right now, so maybe I'll put it out myself. Maybe, I don't know what I'll do. I can probably, I don't know, maybe break a minute, like a minor bit of news that I'm putting out I'm going to do a live Pharmacists record.
Nice.
We a couple of years ago in 2018 we did, well, this relates to Lookout, so I guess I can say it, but we did a Hearts of Oak 15th anniversary tour where we were doing 2 nights in every city, and we would do one night would be Hearts of Oak in its entirety, and the other night would be more of a normal show. And in San Francisco, somebody generously offered to bring their like mobile 24-track rig down and record us, and they did. And in my I was definitely fighting a sinus infection right then, and my voice was not in the best shape, and in my memory I was like, oh god, great, this is the night that we get recorded, and he sent me the files, and I literally was like, I can't even, I'm gonna be so bummed if I listen to this, I can't, and I like put it aside. And then I don't even really remember what, maybe it was just curiosity, but a few months ago I was like, boy, I should listen to that, see if there's something usable. And it's great. It's actually really great. And it's got my whole 6-piece band, which, is like, there's no recording of that, there's no, because the last record I did all myself with Chris Wilson, my drummer, coming in playing drums on most of it, but not even all of it. And and then we sort of expanded the band and had been touring for the last few years with like just this band that I love, and it's not recorded anywhere. And so this is a way that I can A, put something with the full band out into the world, and B, I can hopefully, because they're all affected by the pandemic as well, I can hopefully earn them, $2, $2 more than Spotify is earning anybody or whatever. So yeah, I don't know, maybe that will just go up on Bandcamp, but that's something I'm working on. Any
target date or anything for
that? Not really. It's kind of already a little bit overdue. I was hoping to have it maybe done in time for the end of last year. But I don't really feel like I can do anything new until I sort of clear my decks of some older stuff, and I'm still working on that. So, but it'll be soon. It'll be very soon.
Cool. All right. Keep our ears to the ground. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat. Hope the Lookout Zoomout is awesome. I'm sure it will be.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah.
And take care. And yeah, hope to hear much more Ted Leo in the future.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Talk to you
later. Take care.